I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. So before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's case. Story 1. Early morning on November 15th, 2011, Mrs. Q, a resident of the Shushan New Village residential area in Hefei City, Anhui Province, began what seemed like an ordinary morning like any other. Around 6:30 a.m., she grabbed a small bag and headed to the garbage collection area in the apartment complex to look for some leftover food for her dog. Shortly after arriving at the trash area on the first floor of Building 31, Mrs. Q discovered several pieces of meat in a bin that looked fairly fresh. The dim morning light made it hard for her to see clearly. She could only make out streaks of dark red blood still clinging to the meat's surface. She assumed it was beef, likely discarded by someone in the complex after cooking. Thinking it would be wasteful to leave it, she bent down, picked up the pieces of meat, carefully wrapped them, and took them home. But when she had just reached her door, greed mixed with curiosity compelled her to go back. She thought if someone had thrown away such large pieces of meat, who knows what else might be salvageable nearby. So Mrs. Q decided to return to the trash area, this time heading to Building 33. Behind Building 33, there were 6 trash bins arranged neatly in a row. Mrs. Q bent down and meticulously searched through each bin, hoping to find something else useful. The first bin was empty, containing nothing but some household waste. She moved on to the second bin. This time, as soon as she opened the lid, her eyes immediately stopped at a bright red plastic bag standing out among the garbage. The bag was bulging, seemingly containing something heavy and soft inside. Mrs. Q's heart leaped with joy. Perhaps more beef. Without hesitation, she bent down and used both hands to pull the bag forcefully out of the bin. However, the moment the bag's opening was revealed, an overwhelming fishy stench shot straight up, leaving her stunned. She looked down and immediately screamed in horror. Inside the bag wasn't beef, but 2 bloodied human hands that had been completely skinned. Though the skin layer had been disfigured, their slender, delicate shape suggested they very likely belonged to a young woman. The moment she saw the blood-soaked human hands in the red plastic bag, Mrs. Q froze. Her entire body trembled violently, her mind went blank, her heart pounding as if it would explode in her chest. The overwhelming horror caused her to reflexively throw the bag to the ground, then turn and run. As she ran, she screamed desperately through the empty alley. "Someone's dead. There's a dead person." The cry tore through the quiet morning space, causing people around to begin opening their doors to look out. She ran all the way home, gasping for breath, her heart still not calmed. In her panic, her eyes inadvertently stopped on the bag of beef she had brought home earlier from the trash bin on the first floor of Building 31. At this moment, a chilling thought flashed through her mind. If that bag contained 2 human hands, then could the beef in this bag also be human flesh? The thought struck Mrs. Q like an electric shock, her entire body turning cold. Not daring to verify, she tremblingly picked up the bag of meat, threw it straight into a nearby trash bin, then quickly called the police. Immediately after receiving the report, the Hefei City Police deployed forces to the scene. The peaceful residential area of Shushan New Village was quickly enveloped by an unusually tense atmosphere. Following Mrs. Q's detailed description, they quickly identified the exact location of the trash bin where she discovered the red bag. When they opened the bag, the scene inside left everyone stunned. 2 human hands still soaked in blood, the flesh brutally skinned, seemingly severed not long before. Years of investigative experience told the police that when a body part is discovered, the remaining parts are certainly not far away. The scene was likely where the perpetrator had dismembered the body and scattered the pieces to destroy evidence. They immediately cordoned off the entire surrounding area and ordered work teams to open and inspect every trash bin in the residential complex. Police also began initial reasoning. The dismemberment within such a small area showed that the perpetrator acted under conditions familiar with the terrain, possibly even living right in this area. The probability that either the victim or the perpetrator was a resident of Shushan Village was very high. After grasping the situation, police determined that the Shushan Village residential area, where the incident was discovered, consisted of 48 apartment buildings with surveillance cameras installed at nearly every corner. This was both a challenge and an opportunity for the investigation. Recognizing the high likelihood that the perpetrator was still in the area, police immediately divided forces into two parallel investigation teams to conduct a comprehensive sweep. The first team consisted of forensic technicians and police dogs responsible for sealing off the entire apartment complex, while meticulously checking 70 trash bins of various sizes scattered around the buildings. Each bin was opened, each garbage bag searched, all operations following protocols to preserve crime scene evidence. The air was thick with the smell of garbage and tension. Each time a suspicious bag was discovered, police would immediately stop, record footage, and carefully seal it. Meanwhile, the second team was deployed in a blanket search pattern across the entire area. They divided up to search through bushes, grass areas, children's playgrounds, narrow alleys, and abandoned areas behind the buildings. Even the darkest, most remote places were not overlooked. Very quickly after that, under the keen guidance of the police dogs, the search team discovered another horrifying clue. In the trash bin on the first floor of Building 37, police found a red plastic bag similar to one Mrs. Q had seen earlier. When opened, the entire team nearly held their breath. Inside were pieces of a dismembered human body, blood still seeping through the bag. The gruesome scene caused many to turn away, unable to bear it. What made everyone even more horrified was that the body parts in this bag had also been completely skinned, exactly like the pair of hands discovered first. The entire meat surface had been brutally stripped. The crime scene air was thick with the smell of blood and a terrifying silence, only the sound of camera clicks and the sound of pulling ceiling tape echoing regularly in the night. The search was expanded further. Police meticulously checked every nook and cranny, every trash bin, every bush in the residential area. Not long after, a total of 11 plastic bags containing human body parts were discovered one after another at various locations around the buildings. All had something in common. The victim's entire body had been skinned, the corpse chopped into small pieces, each piece carefully wrapped in separate nylon bags before being discarded. After collecting all 11 bags and transporting them to the forensic lab, medical examiners began the work of piecing together the body parts. After many tense hours, they had temporarily reassembled most of the body, but the head, the most important clue for identifying the victim, was still missing. However, based on bone structure, height, body proportions, and other distinctive details, the medical examiner determined the victim was a young woman, under 25 years old, and the time of death was within about 5 hours. At this point, a police dog suddenly stopped in front of the north wall of the apartment complex, raised its snout high, and barked fiercely nonstop. This unusual behavior immediately attracted the attention of the police team present at the scene. Following the dog's indication, they looked up and discovered something caught in the dense green cypress tree canopy. It was a glove covered in blood. Immediately, forensic technicians carefully used long tongs to retrieve the glove, then sealed it in an evidence bag to avoid damaging traces. At the forensic lab, DNA analysis results were quickly announced. The blood traces on the glove matched completely with DNA found on the victim's body parts. This discovery showed the tool the perpetrator had used when dismembering the victim. From the location where the glove was discovered, police conducted a crime scene reconstruction and put forward a theory. After completing the dismemberment, the perpetrator may have stood on a high floor of one of the nearby buildings, intending to throw the blood-stained glove outside the perimeter wall to destroy evidence. However, because it caught on the cypress tree branches, the evidence was inadvertently left hanging suspended on the treetop. From the clue of the blood-soaked glove caught in the cypress tree, police quickly reached a judgment that the perpetrator very likely lived or operated within the range of buildings near that area, because only from the nearby high floors could the glove have been thrown to that position in the tree. Based on wind direction, throwing angle, and estimated fall range, the suspect range was narrowed down to buildings 31 through 38. Without hesitation, the special police team, along with police dogs, immediately began a focused investigation of each apartment in this area. When the investigation reached Building 32, police received an important testimony from a middle-aged woman living there. She recounted that around 10 p.m. on November 14th, while preparing for bed, she heard a woman's desperate scream coming from the direction of Building 37. The scream lasted only briefly, immediately followed by a burst of fierce dog barking, then everything fell silent again. At that time, she had opened her door to the hallway to check, but seeing nothing unusual, she thought she had misheard. Perhaps it was an argument or a common disturbance. However, The next morning, when she heard that police had discovered a dismembered body in the complex, suspicion immediately arose in her heart. Now, knowing the victim was a young woman, she was certain that the sound that night was not mishearing. The murdered woman might have been killed in Building 37. After hearing testimony from the woman living in Building 32, police immediately shifted the investigation focus to Building 37. Police quickly discovered a few small bloodstains on the stairs between the second and third floors. Technicians immediately conducted rapid on-site testing, and the results showed it was human blood. This discovery completely changed the case's situation. Police determined the perpetrator very likely was living or had appeared in Building 37. A large-scale search was immediately deployed with the sole objective of finding where the perpetrator was hiding. The manhunt lasted throughout a day and night until around 8 p.m. on November 16th, when the police team with police dogs approached the third floor, and the final anomaly finally occurred. Just as they stepped toward room 304, the dog suddenly reacted violently, growling, then lunging straight toward apartment 307. It barked frantically, clawing hard at the wooden door as if something behind it had extremely agitated it. Seeing such a strong reaction, the officers immediately made a preliminary judgment. The perpetrator was very likely hiding inside apartment 307. A work team was positioned to block both ends of the hallway, while the team leader knocked hard on the door, simultaneously calling out their identity as a warning. However, when the door opened, before them was not a panicked suspect or someone sweating in fear, but a short, stocky old man with a round face looking strangely calm. He was sitting right at the dining table, holding a wine cup in his hand, sipping on a few peanuts, occasionally tossing one to the small dog lying obediently at his feet. When the special police appeared at Building 37, the entire residential complex was shaken. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, everyone talking nonstop, curious to know who exactly the cold-blooded killer was. In that suffocating atmosphere, this old man remained strangely calm. This abnormally calm demeanor immediately caught the police's attention. They observed more carefully and realized that behind the calm face was a strange stiffness. His eyes were unnatural, occasionally glancing quickly toward the north fence, where police had previously found the blood-stained glove. The investigation team immediately determined either he truly knew nothing, or conversely, he was deliberately pretending to be innocent to probe the situation. To verify their judgment, police decided to search the old man's apartment. The results not only found important physical evidence, but also step-by-step confirmed that the old man was indeed the actual perpetrator of this case. Initially, when police entered the old man's apartment, everything looked very normal. The living room was tidy, the TV still covered with a thin layer of dust. In the bedroom, bedding was neatly folded, the wardrobe showed no signs of disturbance. The atmosphere was so quiet it gave one the feeling this was the home of an ordinary lonely old man, not a cold-blooded murderer. However, when the investigation team proceeded toward the bathroom, everything immediately changed. Flashlight beams swept across the tile walls, faint reddish streaks suddenly appeared under the cold light. Police moved closer, examining carefully, and then the entire team was simultaneously stunned. On the walls, toilet, sink, even the heating lamp on the ceiling, everywhere had blood traces that had been wiped but still remained streaked. Under the floor, mixed with puddles of water, they saw several long hairs, several small fragments shaped like human tissue and bone pieces. Without another word, the investigators understood that, right in this cramped bathroom, a horrifying scene had once taken place. They immediately signaled to restrain the old man. He didn't struggle, didn't cry innocence, just silently bowed his head, eyes empty, letting police press him to the ground and handcuff him. That chillingly calm demeanor was no different from a silent confession. After sealing the crime scene, police continued to carefully check the kitchen. They found a bone cleaver, a small cutting knife, and large scissors, all still bearing dried blood. Blood samples were sent for testing, and the results completely matched the victim's DNA. At this point, there was no more doubt. Room 307 of the old man was indeed the primary crime scene of the shocking dismemberment case, and he was the official suspect police had been hunting. After being brought to the police station, the old man stated his name was Wang Jiluan, 61 years old, a retired bus driver from Hufei City. However, when facing formal interrogation, Wang displayed suspiciously calm demeanor. Despite police continuously asking questions, from the reason for the blood traces in his home to the whereabouts of the victim, he remained silent, not saying a word. For several hours straight, He maintained the same expression, the same posture, soulless eyes. Faced with this stubborn silence, police had to change tactics. One group was sent back to Wang's residence to continue searching, while another group focused on investigating his social relationships, hoping to find some clues. Results showed that most neighbors around described Wang as eccentric, reclusive, uncommunicative, with almost no interaction with anyone. He had no friends, didn't participate in any community activities, aside from keeping a dog. He had virtually no other hobbies. Some tenants on the upper floor added, once when they came home late from work, their footsteps accidentally woke Wang. Just a few minutes later, he rushed upstairs banging on their door, mouth continuously cursing crudely, calling them worthless people. That burst of anger in the middle of the night completely contradicted his usual quiet exterior appearance, frightening them at the time. At the same time, the search team at Wang's house also discovered an extremely important clue. At the very top of the wardrobe in the bedroom, in an obscure corner difficult to notice, police found a light-colored women's handbag, hidden carefully as if intentionally avoiding others' eyes. Inside the bag were some personal items, including cosmetics, a wallet, and several other small items commonly seen with young women. When opening the wallet, police immediately noticed the national ID card. On it was written the name Fong Lingling, 23 years old, from Hefei, with an address just a few buildings away in the same apartment complex. A women's handbag appearing in the home of a single retired man, also containing someone else's ID inside. This made police suspicious. Could Fong Lingling be the dismembered victim they were investigating? To verify, they followed the address on the ID card and quickly went to Lingling's home. There, through the parents' account, police learned that Lingling had been out of contact for 2 full days. However, the Fong family had no idea that their daughter might have met with tragedy. They said it was normal for Lingling not to come home for a few days, as their daughter often went out with friends or on short business trips. When police mentioned that their daughter might have been harmed, they reacted strongly, believing it was impossible, especially when the suspect was Wang Jiluan, an old close friend of the family. According to their account, Lingling's father and Wang had been colleagues in the same unit, their friendship lasting over a decade. Wang frequently visited the Fong household, treating Lingling like his own daughter, even carrying her in his arms when she was small. Therefore, him being suspected as the perpetrator left the entire Fong family extremely shocked and unable to believe it. Therefore, to clearly identify the victim, police decided to conduct DNA testing. They quickly collected DNA samples from Mr. and Mrs. Fong, then compared them with samples taken from the discovered body parts. The test results couldn't be clearer. The victim was indeed Fong Lingling, the 23-year-old woman. When the results were announced, the atmosphere in the investigation room suddenly fell silent, the horror becoming even more apparent. Meanwhile, police in charge of the outer perimeter also discovered another crucial clue. A resident in the apartment complex who had installed a personal surveillance camera provided police with video footage from the early morning of November 15th. In the video, around 2:15 a.m., a short man with his head slightly bowed, walking hurriedly, appeared beside the ground floor trash bin of Building 31. Just a few seconds later, he quickly threw a bag of clothing into the trash bin, then hurriedly left in the darkness. Although the light was weak and the image quality blurry, an observant officer still recognized that these familiar characteristics quite matched Wang Jiluan. Right after the clue from the first camera footage was confirmed, police expanded the investigation scope to the entire surrounding area. During the process of reviewing surveillance records around the apartment complex, they discovered another important video. Images of Wang Jiluan appearing in a garbage dump area not far from his residence, also in the early morning of November 15th. In the video, he was pulling a small cart. When approaching a pile of collected garbage, Wang stopped for a few seconds, glanced around vigilantly, then quickly pushed the cart close to the edge of the garbage pile. Then, he threw a large object wrapped tightly in a black plastic bag into the garbage pile, then hurriedly left. From this suspicious behavior, police immediately mobilized forces to that area to check all the garbage collected that night. And sure enough, after just a few hours of searching, they discovered a human head. Even more horrifying, this head was also skinless. The scalp and even eyelid skin had completely disappeared, making the victim's face unrecognizable by the naked eye. After being sent for testing, DNA results once again matched Fong Lingling's sample. However, even when faced with clear evidence sufficient to convincingly prove guilt, Wang in the interrogation room remained obstinately silent. But that cold silence was finally broken. After more than 20 hours of continuous high-intensity interrogation, Wang Jiluan's spirit gradually collapsed. He began to tremble, his eyes wavering, then finally raised his head to look straight at the investigator, hoarsely admitting he was the one who killed and dismembered Lingling. From then, the dark curtain of crime was finally lifted. In his detailed statement, Wang confessed that he and the Fong family had known each other for over a decade, were close friends. Lingling from childhood had regarded him as a respectable uncle, frequently visited his home, and Wang appeared concerned, caring like family. However, according to his chilling confession, during the process of witnessing the girl mature day by day, the initial affection had twisted into dark lust. Wang admitted that he had developed unspeakable filthy thoughts, and to have more opportunities to be in contact with Lingling, he exploited her trust, sometimes enticing her to come play at his house, sometimes inviting her to eat, finding every way to approach and possess the young woman's innocence. Because the two families had long-standing close relations, Lingling's parents had not the slightest suspicion that Wang harbored such dark thoughts toward their daughter. In their eyes, this old colleague was simply a kind uncle who loved the child like his own niece, frequently showing concern, asking after her, and treating her warmly. It was precisely this absolute trust that inadvertently opened opportunities for the darkness hidden behind Wang's calm exterior. A few months before the tragedy occurred, Wang's daughter-in-law had just given birth to their first grandson. Wang's ex-wife then left home to go to their son's house to care for the daughter-in-law and new grandchild. The already empty house now had only Wang left, silent and lonely. During those days, he began to feel suffocatingly empty. The psychology of loneliness and repression caused the evil thoughts within him to gradually grow. In Wang's mind, the perverse idea that this was a heaven-sent opportunity to get closer to Lingling began to form. Therefore, for many days before the murder occurred, Wang continuously sent messages to Lingling, disguised in familiar intimate tones, inviting her to come eat at his house. Initially, Lingling felt that being alone with just the two of them was unnatural, so she tactfully declined. However, on the evening of November 14th, Wang still wouldn't give up his intention, continued to send her another message. This time, he lured her with money, saying if she came, he would give her a sum of money. In Lingling's heart, Uncle Wang had always been a respectable uncle, kind, calm, and caring like her own father. She grew up in the arms of those familiar people, so had never had the slightest suspicion that Uncle Wang could harbor such evil intentions. Precisely because of this, facing his continuous invitations full of warmth and friendliness, Lingling simply thought it was an elder's concern for a younger family member. Finally, after many refusals yet still seeing him earnestly begging, Lingling, the simple, kind, and trusting young woman, nodded in agreement, not knowing that this was the beginning of a horrific nightmare waiting for her. On the evening of November 14th, around 9 p.m., Lingling arrived at Wang's home. She had just taken off her coat, hadn't yet sat down when Wang suddenly revealed his true nature. He brazenly made a disgusting demand, wanting her to have sexual relations with him, even shamelessly promising to give her 500 yuan, approximately $70, as a reward. Faced with such vile propositions from the man she had respected for years, Lingling immediately became furious, unable to believe that someone once considered close could utter such words. She shouted, denouncing him as shameless, the yell echoing throughout the quiet room, causing Wang's guard dog to bark incessantly. Fearing the noise would attract neighbors' attention, Wang panicked and rushed to cover Lingling's mouth. She struggled violently, trying to escape the old man's restraint, but couldn't. In the fierce struggle, Wang became increasingly vicious. He used both hands to tightly cover Lingling's mouth and nose, despite her desperate thrashing. In just a few short minutes, the young woman's cries for help gradually faded, and when Wang released his hands, Lingling showed no more signs of life. After Lingling stopped breathing, this demon in human form violated the corpse of the young woman who had just died, disregarding that the victim was the daughter of a friend who had trusted him for decades, was the girl who just the other day had still called him uncle with respect. That act was not only barbaric, but also a disgusting betrayal of both humanity and human bonds. Only when his bestial lust was satisfied did Wang gradually realize he had killed someone, but instead of remorse, he immediately turned to calculating how to conceal his crime. In that small room, he dragged Lingling's body into the bathroom, beginning one of the most horrifying acts humans can imagine. From the kitchen, Wang took out a meat cleaver, scissors, and a bone-chopping knife, Then began the dismemberment process. After completing that cruel work, he placed each dissected body part into red plastic bags. After dismembering Lingling into small pieces, Wang, calm as ever, gathered everything into red plastic bags, then placed them on a small cart. Taking advantage of the quiet night, when everyone in the residential area had already fallen asleep, he silently pushed the cart out of the house, beginning a horrifying journey of scattering body parts through Hefei City. In the cold night, this 61-year-old killer walked through street after street, from the Shushan New Village residential area to Jihe Road, then West Yangtze Road, Anqing Road, Huayuan Street, and even Shushan Road. At each stop, he would open the plastic bag, casually throw a body part into a trash bin, then quietly leave, as if discarding something inanimate rather than the body of a young woman who had trusted him. When it came to the spine, the largest and most difficult bone to handle, Wang struggled for a long time not knowing where to hide it. Just then, a large truck drove by, and in an utterly cold moment, he casually threw the spine into the truck bed, treating it like discarding a useless object. When hearing Wang calmly recount the entire brutal criminal process, even experienced police officers shuddered. They said that throughout their careers, rarely had any murderer been able to recount their crimes with such an expressionless face, no fear, no remorse, even carrying a strange self-satisfaction, as if telling a horror story where he was the narrator rather than the perpetrator. However, even though Wang had confessed to the entire crime, many points in his statement still left police feeling puzzled and full of contradictions. According to what he said, the murder was just an impulsive act in anger, and the dismemberment was only meant to hide the body and erase criminal traces. Yet the way he handled the corpse completely contradicted the common logic of someone wanting to destroy evidence. If he truly wanted to conceal it, why would Wang casually throw most of the bags containing human body fragments right in the very apartment complex where he lived, a place bustling with people and full of surveillance cameras? This incredibly reckless behavior seemed not of someone afraid of being discovered, but of a pervert with a sick psychology, even taking pleasure in hiding crime in plain sight. What made police even more horrified was that after committing the crime and destroying evidence, Wang continued life as normal. Neighbors saw him walking his dog, smoking, chatting casually, no different from a kind retired old man. That cold indifference made people ask, was he not just a murderer, but also someone suffering from psychopathic personality disorder, completely losing the ability to empathize and feel fear? When police asked directly about this point, Wang only remained silent, his soulless eyes looking down at the table, not responding a word. All investigation materials afterward also couldn't decode his true psychology at that time. Perhaps, as people say, in his mind existed a bizarre belief that the most dangerous place is the safest place, that if he appeared calmer, showed more innocence, then no one would suspect him. But in the end, that very blind confidence became the rope that bound him. On March 15, 2012, this brutal case that shocked all of China was officially brought to public trial at the Hefei City Intermediate People's Court. The courtroom that day was packed, everyone wanting to witness with their own eyes the true face of this elderly killer. During the trial, Wang again tried to reframe his crime with evasive testimony and self-defense. He stated that after accidentally strangling Lingling, he had tried to perform CPR 3 times to revive her, but was unsuccessful. Based on this detail, Wang claimed his act of killing was not intentional, but only an accident from emotional outburst. However, with clear evidence and the subsequent cruel acts like dismemberment and disposing of the body, Wang's defense caused a wave of indignation throughout the hall. Nevertheless, because the case had particularly serious circumstances, the court did not pronounce sentence on the spot, but announced they would postpone the sentencing to another time. On April 6th, the trial reconvened for the second time. This time, Wang changed his testimony, trying to redirect public opinion and reduce his charges. He said he had paid Lingling for sexual relations, but Lingling suddenly demanded a higher price, causing the two to have a heated argument, and in anger, he accidentally killed her. Wang's defense lawyer also tried to cite reasons to mitigate the crime, claiming the defendant had no premeditated intent to kill and did not flee after committing the crime. They even presented phone contact records and messages between the two people to prove that Wang and Lingling had once had an ambiguous emotional relationship, and Wang's testimony about being extorted was not entirely unreasonable. However, after reviewing all the files, crime scene evidence, forensic examination results, and the defendant's contradictory statements, the court rejected all of Wang's final defense arguments. The trial panel determined that there was no evidence whatsoever proving that a sexual transaction or financial conflict existed between Wang and the victim, as he claimed. On the contrary, his brutal actions showed a level of intent and cruelty far exceeding the limits of ordinary manslaughter. Therefore, the court officially announced the verdict. Wang Jiluan was guilty of intentional murder. The court sentenced Wang Jiluan to death and simultaneously required him to compensate the victim Lingling's family 380,000 yuan, approximately $53,000. What made people shudder most was that upon hearing the death sentence, Wang still maintained a calm expression, showing no fear or remorse, as if he had completely detached himself from humanity. He did not appeal, said nothing more, only bowed his head to sign the minutes with an indifferently cold demeanor. On November 19, 2012, the death sentence was officially executed. Wang's crime not only took a life, but also shattered the most basic trust between people. It makes one shudder to ask, can we truly fully understand those around us? A story that leaves everyone speechless, where evil doesn't come from distant darkness, but from the very people we thought we knew best. Story 2. Leaving one's homeland for a distant country in pursuit of a better life is a dream shared by countless immigrants. But for today's main character, this wasn't the beginning of happiness. It was a true nightmare on American soil. She was brutally murdered by her own husband in broad daylight in New York City, stabbed to death with merciless blows. What drove a family to destruction, turning a husband into his wife's killer? On September 3, 2024, America's long Labor Day weekend had just ended. New York City returned to its usual frantic pace. But no one expected that on that afternoon, in the bustling Flushing neighborhood, a tragedy would unfold that would shock everyone who heard about it. Around 5:40 p.m., a young man with a tense expression and angry eyes hurried down the stairs leading to the basement of the building at 4139, located at the intersection of Casino Boulevard and Main Street. Below was the Supreme Guard Spa Center, a small massage parlor. Inside at that moment, besides several employees working, there were quite a few customers lying relaxed on massage tables. No one paid attention to the man who had just entered until he pulled out a sharp knife he had prepared. Before everyone's horrified eyes, the man lunged at a female employee working in the parlor, viciously attacking her, repeatedly stabbing her with fatal blows. The woman collapsed on the spot, blood pooling on the cold tile floor, deep wounds in her abdomen and neck turning the scene into chaotic and haunting horror. Screams, running footsteps, and desperate calls for help rang out in panic. Immediately after, the victim was rushed to New York Presbyterian Queens Hospital in critical condition. Doctors tried their best to save her, but by around 8 p.m. that same day, the woman was pronounced dead. As soon as they received the emergency call, New York police immediately dispatched more than 10 police cars, ambulances, and fire trucks to the scene, creating a chaotic and suffocatingly tense atmosphere. Sirens echoed throughout Flushing's narrow streets. Police quickly cordoned off the entire surrounding area, blocking both ends of the sidewalk, preventing passers-by and causing many curious residents to gather, crowding on the sidewalk, whispering and gossiping. According to reports from the scene, when police forces arrived, the perpetrator was still clutching the blood-stained knife in his hand, his face dazed as if he hadn't fully comprehended the crime he had just committed. Without a second's hesitation, police subdued and arrested him on the spot. The crime scene was a building housing many Chinese-owned stores, always bustling with customers. The massage parlor, where the bloody incident occurred, was located in the basement. To get there, one had to pass through a convenience store, an express shipping store, and a hair salon. All three store owners insisted to police that they had no idea what had happened below until they heard screams and alarm sirens. After the incident, the hair salon staff immediately changed their internal rules, no longer allowing any strangers to go down to the basement on their own. They emphasized that if anyone wanted to enter that area, they absolutely must be accompanied by police. Right after the incident occurred, information spreading through the community was extremely chaotic and contradictory. Initially, many people rumored it was a dispute between store owners. Shortly after, completely different information emerged suggesting the incident was a conflict between customers. In such a confused information environment, police investigation work became even more difficult. Investigators gradually brought witnesses back to police vehicles to take statements. Since most of the witnesses were of Asian descent with limited English proficiency, interpreters were mobilized to assist with interrogations. One by one, they were thoroughly questioned by investigators about what they had witnessed. The police cars deployed to maintain order and secure the crime scene only began leaving gradually in the evening. However, according to reports from journalists present at the scene, even when the clock struck around 9 p.m. that night, police remained to continue investigating and collecting evidence inside the parlor. Outside the store where the murder occurred, police continued strict surveillance, ensuring the scene remained undisturbed until the investigation was complete. Immediately after being arrested, the suspect had to undergo an interrogation lasting many hours with investigators. This tense interrogation only ended around 4 a.m. on September 4th, nearly 11 hours after the crime occurred. Immediately afterward, the suspect was officially transferred to the Queens Central Detention Center to await further legal proceedings. After completing the initial investigation steps, police released identifying information for both the suspect and the victim. The male suspect was identified as Ma Jiahai, a 25-year-old from Guizhou Province, China. The victim in this case was Tan Guimei, 26 years old, also from Guizhou Province, China. Police confirmed that Ma Jiahai and Tan Guimei were not strangers, but husband and wife. Both were registered at the same address in Flushing, an apartment in the building at 14-20 Cherry Avenue, Queens. This residence was only a few blocks from the murder scene, a distance that could be walked in just a few minutes. However, when contacted to verify information, the building manager stated that neither the suspects nor the victims' names appeared on the official resident list registered with management. Nevertheless, the manager confirmed that the couple was actually living and renting in the building, possibly under someone else's name or subletting from the primary tenant. On the morning of September 4th, just one day after the shocking incident in Flushing, reporters contacted the New York police to learn more about the investigation's progress. At this time, the head of New York's 109th Precinct spoke out to announce the preliminary investigation results. He stated that this heartbreaking incident was not a random attack, but essentially a severe case of domestic violence leading to murder. According to records collected by police, the male suspect had a history of assaulting his wife while still in China. The physical and psychological wounds the woman had to endure lasted for many years, and this time the final tragedy occurred on foreign soil. The precinct commander also shared in a troubled tone. This is a case that reminds all community residents that when it comes to domestic violence, silence is never acceptable, nor can it be tolerated. He further warned that domestic violence is typically repetitive in nature. Once it occurs, if not intervened in time, it becomes a vicious cycle leading to irreversible consequences. He hoped that anyone who is a victim of abuse, whether physical or psychological, should immediately report to police or seek professional support organizations for help. Only in this way can we prevent heartbreaking tragedies like this from happening again. According to statistics he provided, in America, nearly 50% of homicides are directly related to domestic violence. With domestic violence, there are only two numbers, either 0 times or countless times. According to an acquaintance of the victim, this young couple had only arrived in America just over a month ago. They didn't come through legal channels like many others, but chose the perilous path of illegal border crossing, traversing the border, traveling overland from China to the U.S. However, that journey hadn't yet brought light before darkness enveloped their lives. Upon entering the country, both were discovered and detained by U.S. Border Patrol. During interrogation, the wife was determined to be pregnant, so she was immediately released. The husband, the suspect in this case, was detained and monitored by immigration authorities for a short time, awaiting verification and processing. After more than a week, he was released and hurried to Flushing to reunite with his wife. Additionally, this person revealed that after being released by immigration authorities, during the time her husband was still being monitored, Tang Guimei had to go alone to undergo an abortion procedure, terminating the pregnancy. This was a heavy decision she had to face in the circumstances of newly arriving in a foreign land without sufficient economic means. After undergoing the abortion, Tang Guimei only rested for a short time. Immediately after, economic pressure and the need to earn money forced her to quickly seek direction for herself. She chose to learn acupressure massage. However, she had only been learning for 2 or 3 days, hadn't even gotten familiar with the work yet when disaster struck. However, conflicting information exists around the timing of Ma Jiahai's release. Some other rumors claim he wasn't monitored by immigration authorities for that long. According to this version, he had actually been released by immigration much earlier, but was then suspected of theft, which is why he was arrested by police again. This is why there was information suggesting he had only been released just 1 week before this shocking incident occurred. Regarding the cause leading to this heartbreaking case, many sources indicate that everything began with simmering conflicts in the young couple's marriage. After arriving in America, their life was far from easy. They had to worry about making a living while shouldering enormous debt from the border-crossing journey. Between financial pressure and emotional rifts, the relationship between Majahai and Tangwime gradually became tense. Majahai appeared angry and dissatisfied because his wife had an abortion not long before, believing she had betrayed his desire to become a father. Other sources said he was unhappy with Tangwime's work at the massage parlor. Additionally, there were rumors that Majahai had discovered WeChat messages on his wife's phone between her and another man with flirtatious, intimate content. Blind rage erupted. In a moment of losing control, Majahai rushed out of the house, heading to the massage parlor where Tangwime was working. He brought a sharp knife, and in his impulsive fury, stabbed his wife multiple times in the neck and body before the horrified eyes of employees and customers present in the parlor. After the shocking murder occurred, many rumors began spreading through the Chinese community in Flushing. Some said there were ambiguous relationships between the victim and some customers at the massage parlor, stirring up considerable gossip. Faced with this misleading and baseless information, the victim's older sister could no longer remain silent. Besides contacting the Guizhou Fellow Townsmen Association in America for help, she also proactively appeared in media outlets, accepting interviews to tell the true story about her sister Tangwime's life and her husband Majahai. She recounted that Tangwime and Majahai met in 2016, when both were young people from a poor rural area in Guizhou Province, China. After getting to know each other, they came together through sincere love, then married not long after. In 2018, their first daughter was born, bringing simple happiness to their small home. By 2020, their second daughter was also born. However, these two children, now still living in China, lost their mother when they were still very young. The sister recounted that her brother-in-law's family's economic situation had always been very difficult and impoverished. Daily survival weighed heavily on this young couple's shoulders. To have enough money to cover living expenses and raise their two daughters, both Guizhou and Majahai had to work away from home long-term, doing hired work in different places. They sacrificed time with their children, sacrificed their youth, all for a fragile hope of a better future. Normally, if two people could overcome difficulties together, working hard and supporting each other, then sooner or later the family's economy would improve and become more stable. However, the harsh truth was that this was just a distant dream. Unlike other working families who could overcome hardships together, this couple's relationship gradually went down a tragic dead end. Instead of becoming a solid support for his wife, Jiahai began showing alarming violent tendencies. From the first times, Guimei had repeatedly endured physical abuse from her own husband. What was worse was that after each act of violence, Jiahai would appear remorseful, crying and apologizing, promising to change and never repeat his actions. Those apologies had softened his wife's heart many times, making her believe he would change. But time proved those promises were just empty words. Instead of gradually diminishing, the domestic violence became increasingly severe and cruel over time. The level of violence escalated beyond imagination. He had even once used the back of a knife blade to strike directly at his wife's scalp, causing painful wounds and leaving trauma both physical and psychological. Faced with such brutal behavior, many would wonder why Guimei didn't leave this husband sooner. The answer lies in the psychology of many women in similar circumstances, because of the children. To give her two young daughters a complete family, Guimei had repeatedly chosen to forgive her husband, enduring to the point of tormenting herself. But the tragedy was that this bottomless forgiveness not only didn't solve the problem, but inadvertently empowered the perpetrator of violence. Jiahai's violent tendencies became increasingly worse day by day. The sister also pointed out a particularly serious detail, showing Jiahai's level of cruelty. Even when Guimei was pregnant with their younger daughter, the couple still had fierce arguments. And during that incident, Jiahai showed no mercy and struck his pregnant wife extremely hard. As a result, Guimei suffered severe hemorrhaging, and ultimately the baby had to be born prematurely under dangerous circumstances. This wasn't just simple domestic violence, but behavior that directly threatened the lives of both people. Guime's sister continued recounting that over the years, no matter how much her sister tried to maintain family happiness, there were ultimately times when she couldn't bear it anymore and had to seek legal intervention. Specifically, Guime had to call the police twice, seeking help from authorities. The first time occurred in January 2023. That was the first time Guime overcame her fear, overcame the shame and worry about family disgrace to pick up the phone and call police for help. However, unfortunately, that intervention seemed insufficient to stop Jiahai from continuing his path of violence. After police left, family life continued with endless cycles of abuse. By April 2024, just months before the final tragedy, the two had another serious conflict, this time even more violent than previous ones. With no other option, Guime once again had to call police, hoping to find protection for herself. In this fierce argument, not only her head, but also Guime's face suffered serious injuries. The physical pain combined with psychological despair pushed her to the brink of complete collapse. According to the sister, if it hadn't been at that exact moment that their younger daughter was beside her crying miserably, using her small hands to hold on and plead with her mother, then Guime, in that state of utter desperation, might even have intended to end it all, to end her pain-filled life right there. After this serious family incident, under police witness and requirement, Jiahai had to write a commitment letter right at the police station. In it, he promised he would never lay hands on his wife again, would control his anger and behave like a proper husband and father. But in the end, reality once again proved that promises on paper, commitments written under police pressure, were all just worthless, empty words. That commitment letter couldn't prevent the final bloody tragedy from occurring. The sister also revealed that to realize their American dream, Guime and Jiahai had to borrow an enormous debt of up to 500,000 yuan, approximately $70,000. This was an astronomical figure for an ordinary working family from rural areas. This debt was like a huge boulder weighing on their shoulders, making every subsequent decision revolve around how to earn enough money to repay it. Precisely because of this tremendous financial pressure, after arriving in America, the two basically had no ability, either economically or psychologically, to raise the child in the mother's womb. Moreover, having an additional newborn would prevent Guime from working to earn money, while the debt kept counting each day with increasingly rising interest. They could only focus on earning money to pay off that crushing debt. Faced with this brutal reality, Guime had no choice but to have an abortion. After undergoing the abortion procedure, Guime only rested and recuperated for about 10 days. Immediately after, she had to start looking for work to have income. However, she was severely limited by the language barrier, making communication and job hunting extremely difficult. Additionally, she had no professionally recognized skills in America, no degrees, no work experience suitable for the labor market here. After considering options, Guime decided to go to the Supreme Guard Spa, the place that would later become the scene of the bloody tragedy, to learn acupressure massage. To have the opportunity to learn this trade, she had to pay $200 in tuition fees. The sister continued emphasizing in a firm and emotional tone that her sister, Guime, at the time the tragedy occurred, was completely only in the learning phase. She hadn't officially started working, hadn't begun serving customers, didn't have any clients at all, whether male or female. She had only been learning for 2 or 3 days, was still in the process of familiarizing herself with basic massage techniques, didn't yet have sufficient skill to serve customers. The sister particularly wanted to clarify this to completely refute the toxic rumors spreading in the community, rumors insinuating that Guime had inappropriate relationships with male customers or provided unhealthy services at the massage parlor. These rumors were not only baseless, but also extremely insulting to the honor of the deceased, causing the family immense grief. The sister emphasized that there was absolutely no serving male customers or any improper behavior as rumored. Therefore, the sister affirmed that this horrific murder case absolutely didn't occur for the reasons spread by rumors, not because Jiahai was unhappy about his wife's abortion, nor because he suspected his wife of improper behavior at the massage parlor. All those explanations were distortions of the truth. As for the real reason, the direct cause that led to the tragedy, the sister had the opportunity to learn it from the perpetrator's own mouth. Specifically, 3 days after Jiahai was arrested, on September 6, 2024, he was allowed to make a phone call from the detention center, and he called Guime's sister. In that tense and painful phone call, when the sister used a trembling voice mixed with anger to question her brother-in-law, "Why did you do this? How could you be so cruel?" According to his account, on September 3rd, the very day the tragedy occurred, he and Gueme had an argument over the phone. The cause of the argument? Just some trivial matters. Small, petty things so minor that even he himself couldn't remember specifically what they argued about. Not about money. Not about infidelity. Not about any deep conflict, but simply trivial disputes that any couple might encounter in daily life. In that argument, Jia felt his wife's words were harsh. In his unstable emotional state, Jia didn't just simply get angry, but quickly escalated to developing murderous intent, an extreme and unforgivable decision. What was frightening was that he didn't just have the thought and leave it at that, but acted in a planned and determined manner. He first proactively ran to a nearby store and bought a knife. Then, with the knife in hand and rage flooding his mind, he ran straight to the massage parlor, where he knew his wife was learning the trade. And right there, in front of many people, he didn't hesitate to swing the knife and stab his young wife multiple times in succession, cruelly taking her life. The sister recounted with a bitter voice, "My brother-in-law told me that even now, even while sitting in the prison cell, even having had time to reflect on his actions, Jia himself cannot understand, doesn't know why he had to do that." After publicly disclosing all this information fully and transparently, the victim's sister expressed her two greatest wishes from the bottom of her heart. First, she earnestly hoped that the community would stop spreading misleading information, baseless rumors that damaged the honor of the deceased. Second, and most importantly, Gueme's sister also hoped that this painful story would become a warning, an alarm bell for all women who are victims of domestic violence. She called on them not to choose the path of unlimited forgiveness as her sister had done. Don't think that your endurance and sacrifice will reform the abuser. Domestic violence never disappears on its own, but only escalates if not decisively stopped. Meanwhile, from a completely different angle of the story, the suspect, Jia younger brother, was also in a state of desperation and helplessness. He had proactively sought out the Guizhou Fellow Townsmen Association to ask for help. Unlike the victim's sister, who was seeking justice and truth, the suspect's brother was hoping to find some ray of hope for his criminal brother. He earnestly hoped the association could play the role of bridge, conveying information and his message to his detained brother, or at least to Jia's lawyer, wanting him to look at the reality that back home there were still two young daughters waiting. For the children's sake, he should try to reform himself, try to live better, live more responsibly in prison, and hope that one day he might receive a reduced sentence and have a chance to see his children again. The president of the Guizhou Fellow Townsmen Association in America stated that the association's board of directors was assisting with handling Tang Guime's funeral arrangements. Because Tang Guime's family was so impoverished, they desperately needed help. He was preparing to launch a community fundraising campaign to help the two innocent young children still in Guizhou overcome their difficulties. Besides this case, there's another case where the main character was also a female massage worker in Flushing, New York. Zhou Yu, a 42-year-old Chinese massage worker, had lived on foreign soil for many years. In those early days of illegal immigration to America, she lived quietly, lonely, and precariously in a strange world, without relatives, without friends, and without the skills or conditions to find stable, decent work. In desperation, a fellow townsman friend introduced her to work at a spa center in Ohio. From then on, Zhou Yu became attached to the massage profession that helped her sustain her life on foreign soil. Then in 2019, Zhou Yu's dull life suddenly turned in a different direction. A middle-aged married man with an elegant and courteous demeanor unexpectedly entered her life. The two couldn't control their emotions and gradually developed feelings. The man spent lavishly, took her traveling everywhere, making Zhou Yu, who had lived alone for years, feel the warmth she had lost long ago. By his side, she felt alive again, with someone to listen, someone who cared, someone who made her feel she was still loved. However, behind that sweet relationship was an ironic truth. The man had a wife and child. Zhou Yu knew this clearly, but the more she tried to let go, the more she couldn't break free. She had invested all her genuine feelings into that wrong relationship, then became immersed in illusion that one day the man would divorce, marry her, and they would build a new family together, have children, live happily like ordinary people. However, when Zhou Yu was immersed in that relationship, the man told her a truth that shattered her heart. He admitted that between him and his ex-wife there were no longer any feelings. The marriage was just an empty shell. However, he couldn't leave his daughter. Hearing those words, Zhou couldn't blame him, couldn't force him. She could only accept the fate of being a mistress in the shadows, continuing to maintain this secretive but conflicted relationship. Day after day, Zhou still worked at the small massage parlor in Ohio, living a dull, monotonous life. But failure in love, combined with repetitive manual labor work, gradually made her lose faith in herself. Increasingly, more male customers came to the spa. Initially, Zhou only saw them as strangers. But then for money, for loneliness, for emptiness, she was half pushed, half willing, gradually stepping into the dark side of the profession, doing things involving physical services. However, everything going wrong in life made her increasingly dissatisfied and angry. She blamed all her mistakes on her lover's daughter, believing that the girl had destroyed the happiness she deserved to have. In rage and jealousy, Zhou began calling the man's home, cursing his ex-wife and daughter, venting all her suppressed frustrations. And then, a dark thought began sprouting in her mind. If that mother and daughter no longer existed, perhaps she would have her man. Since embarking on the path of serving customers, Zhou's psychology became increasingly distorted, hatred gradually consuming reason. When the man's feelings began to cool, Zhou became even more convinced that the cause was his wife and daughter. Therefore, she hired a hitman and sent threatening messages, but none succeeded. She was discovered before the crime could occur. Currently, Zhou is detained in prison. These two stories, one about the young wife, Tang Guimei, who died at the hands of her abusive husband, and one about the lonely woman, Zhou, who destroyed her life in hatred and jealousy, seem unrelated, but reflect the same tragedy, the desperation of people in a foreign land. Tang Guimei and Ma Jiahai once crossed mountains and forests with faith in a better future, but the light of the American dream quickly faded before the darkness of poverty, debt, and violence. And Zhou, a 42-year-old woman on foreign soil, because of her craving for love and persistent loneliness, lost her reason and turned herself into a criminal. In a harsh life of survival, perhaps the most precious thing each of us needs to preserve is calmness and kindness. Because in just 1 minute of losing control, all dreams, whether dreams of changing one's life or dreams of love, can turn into nightmares. Story 3. Under the dim light of the evening, the city of Maizuru, Japan, was enveloped in the tranquil ambience of spring, creating a sense of peaceful serenity. However, that peace was shattered when a mysterious disappearance occurred, breaking the calm. A 15-year-old high school girl quietly left her home late at night, and no one knew where she went. Her sudden disappearance, with her actions shrouded in mystery, felt like a missing puzzle piece in the otherwise perfect picture of the city. What truly happened that night? What was she searching for? And who pulled her into this mysterious storm? The story begins on a Tuesday, May 6, 2008, in Maizuru, a city located in the northern part of Kyoto Prefecture. At 10 p.m., when the quiet atmosphere of the city enveloped everyone in sleep, Miho Kosugi, a 15-year-old high school student, was in her room. When her mother had fallen into a deep sleep, she quietly woke up, changed her clothes, and left the house alone at 11 p.m. It was late, but where was she going? Miho was a somewhat introverted girl who enjoyed walking alone at night to soak in the peacefulness of the city. She had shared on her personal website how much she loved the beauty of Maizuru, with its fresh air, rolling hills, and crystal-clear seas. However, this outing seemed to be more than just a stroll. An hour later, at 11:57 p.m., she posted an update on her personal website, Found It, with a photo attached. Although the photo was a bit blurry, it was clear that it depicted bright red construction lights. This information would later become an important clue in the investigation. But what had she found? The answer remains unknown to this day. Miho continued her walk, and at 12:50 a.m., she called a close friend and calmly mentioned that she was near a pharmacy along the highway walking alone. After the call, she also sent an email to her brother in Tokyo, though the content of this email has never been disclosed. The next morning, her mother woke up and discovered that Miho was not at home. Initially, she wasn't too worried because she knew her daughter often took late-night walks. However, by 9 a.m., when Miho still hadn't returned, her concern grew. After discussing it, the family decided to report her missing to the police. The police quickly began searching the area around Miho's home. Just 1 day later, they discovered her body in a small forest just minutes from her house. The crime scene showed signs of a violent attack, with evidence of a severe blow to her head. Strangely, her clothes were missing, and the time of death was estimated to be in the early hours of May 7th, likely due to suffocation after being attacked from behind. Upon investigating the crime scene, the police concluded that this was the first case of its kind in the area. The scene was surrounded by trees and near a small river, a quiet and secluded location. No fingerprints of the perpetrator were found, suggesting that the attacker might have been prepared and worn gloves. The police suspected the perpetrator was a young and physically strong male. The police began investigating Miho's social connections, searching for anyone who might be linked to the case. Miho was a 15-year-old girl in 10th grade. Her childhood had been difficult, as her parents divorced early, and she had always lived with her mother. She also struggled with mental health issues from a young age. Her mother later had a new boyfriend, and though they were not officially married, Miho always referred to him as her stepfather. According to the school principal, Miho was a quiet and modest girl. Her life was different from her peers, as she had gone through many hardships, including changing schools 3 times due to mental health issues. It was only after receiving treatment and recovery that she was able to return to a normal life. A middle school classmate shared that Miho often missed school, but never ran away or experienced bullying. She didn't have many friends at school, participated little in school activities, and had never had conflicts with anyone. Neighbors in her community also said they had never seen her argue with anyone. Miho began attending high school in April of that year, just a month after the school year started. Before enrolling, her stepfather passed away in a car accident. This shock worsened her mental health, and she did not attend class or participate in the school opening ceremony. Despite being on a break from school and having a rather introverted personality, Miho was not the type to stay at home. She frequently visited her friends' houses. On her personal website, she once shared her habit of taking evening walks, and there was even an incident where she was mistaken for a suspicious person by the police. Miho also enjoyed playing guitar, and before the incident, she had been looking for like-minded people to start a band. During the investigation, the police focused on a male high school student who had a close relationship with Miho. There were rumors that they had a romantic conflict, but at the time of the incident, he had a solid alibi, so he was cleared from the list of suspects. Miho's mother, in an interview, expressed her indescribable pain. Her daughter meant everything to her, and she believed no words could fully express how important Miho was in her life. She shared that Miho was a kind girl who had once adopted a stray cat. She believed that if this tragedy hadn't happened, Miho could have grown into a wonderful person in the future. After investigating, the police found no suspicious individuals among Miho's social circles. They then shifted their focus to physical evidence. Through their search, they discovered Miho's clothes in a river about 32 feet north of the crime scene. The back left pocket of her jeans showed signs of abrasion, and her white tank top had a hole, possibly from being caught on something. What stood out was that, despite her head being severely beaten while alive, her clothes were clean, with no blood or other traces. Other personal items, such as her phone, purse, and shoes, were found scattered near the scene. At Miho's mother's request, images of these items were released in an effort to find witnesses. The police also checked the emails on Miho's phone. Before the incident, she had communicated with her family and some close friends, but the content mainly revolved around her daily life and did not contain anything unusual. On the phone, there were only Miho's fingerprints, with no signs of anyone else's involvement. The police used data from Miho Kosugi's phone to reconstruct her movements on the day of the incident. Based on her phone call with friends, they determined she was traveling on a highway. After leaving her home, Miho walked along Route 27 for about an hour, stopping at a gas station nearby. This area was in a suburban region, with some places having dim lighting, which explained the blurry photo she posted on her personal website. The police reviewed the surveillance footage from the gas station and discovered Miho Kosugi wearing a white tank top, walking west. After nearly an hour of walking, she approached a pharmacy about 1.2 miles away from the gas station. At a typical walking pace, this distance would normally take about 25 minutes, but Miho took twice that long. On the day of the incident, she was wearing a pair of sandals with thick soles and heels about 2.4 inches high, which were not suitable for long walks. The pharmacy was about 3.7 miles from her house. The police were puzzled as to how Miho could have walked such a long distance. To test this, They sent a female officer of similar height and weight to Miho, wearing the same type of sandals, to walk the route from the pharmacy to her house. It took the officer 1 hour and 45 minutes. After the test, the officer reported that her feet were extremely sore and the heels of the sandals were damaged. Based on this, the police concluded that Miho may have used some form of transportation. Miho's mother stated that their family did not own a car, and the only means of transportation was a bicycle, which was still parked outside their house on the night of the incident. Since the crime occurred quite late, and there were no public transportation options, it's possible that Miho had received help from someone. The police confirmed with Miho's friends that she did not have any meetings scheduled. So, was there another reason for her late-night walk? This question still remains unanswered. While the police continued searching for clues, a resident near the scene provided crucial information. Early on the morning of May 7th, near the crime scene, they heard a woman screaming, as if she was in an emergency situation. After that, they heard voices from both a man and a woman, but they could not identify who they were. 8 days after the crime, the investigation made progress when a truck driver gave an important testimony. He said that in the early hours of that day, while driving down a road about 984 feet from the crime scene, he saw a man and a woman walking a bicycle. The woman appeared to resemble Miho Kasugi. Though it was dark, the driver couldn't clearly identify the man, but he estimated he was about 20 years old. Based on the truck driver's testimony, the police reviewed surveillance footage from that area and discovered footage of Miho Kasugi walking by. At 1:14 a.m., she was walking alone on the street. 2 minutes later, a man wearing a hat, riding a black bicycle, passed by. They were walking in different directions and seemed to not know each other. However, at 1:36 a.m., another surveillance camera captured Miho Kasugi walking alongside that man, heading toward the crime scene together. So who is the man? The police took notice of a man named Nakakitsumi, 60 years old, after receiving descriptions from local residents. Nakakitsumi had strange behavior and mannerisms, often wandering the streets late at night and rummaging through trash. His home was filled with various collected items, such as metal pipes, scrap materials, and other concerning objects. Some residents reported that he often took these items with him when he went on his nightly walks. Given that Miho Kasugi was attacked with a blunt object, suspicions about Nakakitsumi grew stronger. A nearby restaurant employee also mentioned that he often wore a hat and rode a black bicycle at night. The police showed this employee surveillance footage, and although the image was unclear, the employee confirmed that the person in the footage had a similar build and height to Nakakitsumi. Another witness confirmed that the day before the incident, they saw Nakakitsumi walking around wearing a black hoodie. The surveillance video also captured a man in a black hoodie, possibly Nakakitsumi. After the incident, some people told the police that he had discarded several pieces of clothing, including the black hoodie. Strangely, he also repainted his black bicycle, as if he were trying to hide something. To the local residents, Nakakitsumi was always a troublemaker, both at work and in the community. He was known for frequently arguing with others, and when angry, he could act impulsively, making it impossible for others to predict his behavior. Moreover, there were reports that he showed an excessive interest in young women. Nakakitsumi lived in a public housing complex in Mizuru, without a job, relying solely on social welfare. His apartment was just a few hundred meters from the crime scene, and Miho Kasugi also lived nearby. With these clues, the police decided to question him. Facing suspicion, Nakakitsumi denied any involvement, claiming that at the time of the incident, he had been drinking at various izakaya bars and didn't have time to commit the crime, but there was no one who could corroborate his alibi. Although there were many questions surrounding him, an important clue from a truck driver helped clear Nakakitsumi's name. The truck driver stated that, at the time of the incident, he saw a man about 20 years old, not Nakakitsumi, walking with Miho Kasugi. Even though the surveillance footage showed Nakakitsumi with Miho, it wasn't enough to prove he was the perpetrator. In November 2008, 6 months after the incident, Nakakitsumi was arrested on suspicion of stealing ritual offerings at a shrine in women's underwear. Although there was not enough evidence to connect him to Miho Kasugi's murder, many indirect pieces of evidence pointed to him. The police requested to search Nakakitsumi's home, but his lawyer objected, arguing that the search was unreasonable and demanded the search warrant be cancelled, which delayed the police's plan. After much debate, the police were finally able to search Nakakitsumi's home over the course of 6 days under the supervision of his lawyer. During the search, Nakakitsumi's lawyer attempted to film the entire process and only stopped when instructed by the police. Some people supported the lawyer's actions, arguing that recording the search was reasonable, as Nakakitsumi's room was quite messy, filled with items collected from outside. If the police found anything resembling Miho Kosugi's belongings in the room, it could be used as damaging evidence against him. However, the police did not exploit the items in Nakakitsumi's room to easily accuse him. Instead, they focused on searching for items such as clothing, fibers, or soil from Miho Kosugi's crime scene. Despite a thorough examination, they did not find any useful clues. In January 2009, nearly a year after the incident, the police revisited the truck driver who had provided important testimony. However, this time, they made a serious mistake. The police directly showed the truck driver a photo of Nakakitsumi for identification. Normally, the police would provide a photo album containing pictures of several individuals so that the witness could pick out the suspect. But in this case, they showed the driver only the suspect's photo before the identification. This led to a change in the driver's statement, as he described the man walking with Miho Kosugi as about 20 years old, and later changed it to a man between 50 and 60 years old, with physical features matching Nakakitsumi. This mistake became a disadvantage for the prosecution in the later trial. Based on the witness statement and the surveillance footage, the police arrested Nakakitsumi again in April 2009. 3 years after the incident, in May 2011, the case was tried in the Kyoto District Court. Nakakitsumi was charged with murder and sexual assault. Since there was no direct evidence, the court focused on indirect evidence. The defense argued that the truck driver's testimony had changed and was unreliable. Nakakitsumi continuously defended himself, insisting he had never met Miho Kosugi. However, the police pointed out that during pre-trial questioning, Nakakitsumi accurately described the color and shape of Miho Kosugi's purse on the day of the incident. The police believed that only the perpetrator would know this detail and requested the court to sentence Nakakitsumi to death. However, the questioning process was neither recorded nor filmed, and Nakakitsumi denied making these statements. The judge ruled that, prior to the incident, Nakakitsumi and Miho Kosugi had had continuous contact, making it unlikely that someone else could have been the perpetrator. After the trial, the court convicted Nakakitsumi and sentenced him to life in prison. Nakakitsumi disagreed with the verdict, claiming the truck driver's testimony was entirely fabricated, and he repeatedly shouted in court, "Your Honor, I am innocent." He later announced he would appeal the decision. A year and a half later, an appeals trial was held at the Osaka High Court. In the initial trial, the two main grounds for convicting Nakakitsumi were the truck driver's testimony and the surveillance footage. However, the appellate judge argued that both the truck driver's testimony and the surveillance footage were indirect evidence, and therefore needed to be considered with caution before being used as grounds for conviction. The judge believed the truck driver may have been influenced during the lengthy interrogation, leading to confusion in identifying the physical features of the perpetrator and Nakakitsumi, resulting in a misidentification. Therefore, the driver's testimony could not be considered reliable. Additionally, the surveillance footage was too blurry, only allowing for the identification of a figure, and while the person in the video was wearing clothing similar to Nakakitsumi's, it could not be confirmed that it was him. When asked how he knew the appearance of Miho Kosugi's purse, Nakakitsumi stated that he had seen it in photos released by the police. During questioning, he mentioned that the police had repeatedly insulted and attacked him, which led him to say that it was something he had seen during the crime. After the trial, the Osaka High Court reversed the decision and declared Nakakitsumi not guilty. Upon hearing the result, Nakakitsumi was moved to tears, feeling that he had finally been exonerated. However, Miho Kosugi's mother, who was in the courtroom, appeared shocked and then broke down in tears, being assisted out of the courtroom. In an interview, she expressed that she could not accept the verdict, believing that Nakakitsumi had tormented her family for too long and that it could not end like this. She decided to continue her appeal. Despite her wishes, 6 years after the case, the Supreme Court of Japan upheld the appellate court's not guilty ruling. However, before the final verdict was made, Nakakitsumi was arrested on suspicion of stealing magazines from a convenience store and was sentenced to 1 year and 2 months in prison. Therefore, on the day of the verdict, he was in jail. Nakakitsumi had a long criminal record and was a frequent inmate. In his youth, He was notorious in his neighborhood and had been sent to a juvenile detention center for extortion. At the age of 25, due to his fiancée's family opposing their marriage, he tracked her down to her home and murdered both her and her younger brother. He was sentenced to 16 years in prison. After demonstrating good behavior, he was granted early parole, but just a few years later, he was arrested on suspicion of assaulting a 21-year-old woman. According to media reports at the time, Nakakitsumi used violence to attack a woman, injuring her, but fortunately, a police officer happened to pass by and apprehended him after chasing him for about 130 feet. He was then sentenced to 6 years in prison. The not guilty verdict for Nakakitsumi caused a great deal of surprise and public debate. Some people hypothesized about Miho Kosugi's motive for going out. On the day of the incident, she posted a picture of red construction lights on her personal website with the caption, "Found it," and seemed very excited. This could suggest that she had spoken to friends about the red construction light or had mentioned it. It's possible her purpose for going out was to search for that construction light, and her excitement upon finding it motivated her actions. Miho Kosugi was found in a forest, and the evidence at the scene indicated that this was indeed where the crime first occurred. The area was quite secluded with few people around, and to reach it, one had to cross a small river. This raises the question, why did she go to this place in the middle of the night? A friend of Miho Kosugi offered a hypothesis about the situation on that day. Before the incident, Miho's mental state had been unstable, and she frequently expressed feelings of loneliness and a lack of protection. It's possible that, while walking outside, she encountered a man on a bicycle who seemed friendly and offered her a ride for part of the journey. Miho may have felt safe and let her guard down. There were rumors that, before the trial, Nakakitsumi confessed his crime to a fellow inmate. When asked by others if he committed the crime, he shook his head. But one night, he subtly admitted that he had originally intended to just follow her, but when the victim saw him, he had no choice but to silence her. However, the authenticity of this rumor is unclear. Some criminals tend to boast about things they haven't done, so this cannot be used as the basis for a conviction. Some media outlets raised questions about the truck driver's testimony. Typically, drivers don't pay much attention to pedestrians, but the truck driver was able to recall the appearance of both Miho Kosugi and the perpetrator. This was quite odd. To test this theory, a reporter walked along the same route at night. The street was darker than expected, and even taking photos was difficult. The reporter suggested that even if the truck driver slowed down and paid close attention, it would still have been difficult to make out such details. Among the various theories proposed, one stands out. Some people suspect that Nakakitsumi might not only be responsible for Miho Kosugi's murder, but could also be linked to the case of another high school girl. In November 2001, an 18-year-old senior named Akina Tanda was found dead in the Tomo River in Maizuru. Akina Tanda, 18 years old, 5 feet 6 inches tall, outgoing and socially active, was found wearing her school uniform with injuries to her neck and chest, and her button had disappeared. Based on the shape of the wounds, the weapon could have been a box cutter. Her personal belongings were found near the river, but her wallet and keys were missing. Akina Tanda had just secured a job at a beauty salon before the incident and was very excited about it. The last time she was seen was 12 days before the crime. On that day, she had been invited to attend a school festival at a friend's school and had requested to leave school early to take a train there. After the festival ended around 5 p.m., she visited another friend, but found them not at home and eventually went to a park to play on a swing. 2 elementary school children witnessed this. At 5:30 p.m., someone saw Akina Tanda walking alone on a small road along the Tomo River. This was the last time she was seen. The location was only about 1,300 feet away from where she was later found, and many speculated that she met with harm that evening. The area was close to the river, surrounded by trees, and with few people around, so it wasn't until many days later that her body was discovered. Akina Tanda's family reported her missing, but initially, the police assumed she had run away. It wasn't until her body was found that the police began to take the case seriously. However, because time had passed and key evidence had been washed away by rain and the river, the investigation yielded no results. As a result, even though many years have passed, the suspect has still not been identified. The case of Akina Tanda shares similarities with the case of Miho Kosugi. Both were found near rivers, and the distance between the two discovery sites, as the crow flies, is only about 1.2 miles. After Miho Kosugi's case, Nakakitsumi's behavior continued. For months after the court's verdict, he attacked a female co-worker at a house in North Osaka, injuring her. He was arrested by the police at the scene. Nakakitsumi worked as a janitor at a hotel, while the female co-worker was the hotel manager. Due to his poor performance at work, he had been fired and, holding a grudge, sought revenge. According to the hotel manager, Nakakitsumi suddenly barged into her room wearing a mask and hat, gloves on his hands, and holding a fruit knife. Before she could react, he grabbed her from behind and attacked. The hotel manager fought back fiercely and was fortunate enough to run out and call for help. She was discovered in time and survived. At trial, Nakakitsumi told a completely different story. He claimed that when he entered the manager's room, he had asked her for his wages, but not only was he not responded to, he was also attacked. He said he had only retaliated in self-defense. During the trial, Nakakitsumi shouted that he should be the one convicted of attempted murder. He also expressed that being in prison was extremely uncomfortable and painful, and that he would not reoffend. However, this statement was not convincing. The hotel manager was severely injured, and although she recovered, she continued to have difficulty speaking and eating. Meanwhile, Nakakitsumi only sustained minor injuries to his finger and face, which made it clear who was the one to have initiated the attack. As a result, Nakakitsumi was sentenced to 16 years in prison for attempted murder. In an interview, the hotel manager expressed her hope that Nakakitsumi would die in prison, as if he were released. Similar incidents could occur again. A year and a half later, in July 2016, due to declining health, Nakakitsumi was transferred to a medical prison. His specific illness was not disclosed. After unsuccessful treatment, Nakakitsumi passed away at the age of 68. One notable point is that Nakakitsumi's surname, Naka, was once thought to be of foreign or immigrant origin. However, some media outlets explained that the surname comes from noble families and shrines, mostly found in the Tohoku region, meaning Nakakitsumi was, in fact, Japanese by birth. His death brought some solace to Miho Kosugi's family, who firmly believed that Nakakitsumi was the perpetrator. The previous not guilty verdict he received had become a thorn in their hearts. Every year, as the anniversary of their daughter's death approached, the mother could not sleep peacefully. Since her daughter's passing, the mother would visit the crime scene every month, bringing sunflowers and pink grass, the flowers her daughter loved while alive, and sit quietly there for several minutes. Some friends, relatives, and kind-hearted people occasionally visited the site to lay flowers and pray for her. However, when at work, she never told her colleagues about the death of her daughter, as she didn't want to be pitted. Instead, she would say that she had a daughter and pretend that her daughter was still alive. This helped her feel a bit more at ease. The case of Miho Kosugi was like an open wound, leaving an indelible pain in the peaceful town of Maizuru. The red construction light that the young girl cheerfully called found it seemed to have sealed her fate, pointing to a truth that could never be uncovered. The Miho Kosugi case is an example of the helplessness of justice when the evidence is too weak to convict the perpetrator. Although Nakakitsumi's death did not bring closure to Miho's family, they continue to live with an unhealable sorrow, while the truth remains shrouded in darkness. Story 4. She was both beautiful and brilliant, a former Playboy cover model, yet also a doctor of psychology from the University of California, Berkeley. Amy Harwick wasn't known in Hollywood just for her looks, but for her intellect, compassion, and presence. She was a licensed therapist, an author, and a beloved public speaker, often lighting up television screens and podcast studios with her positive energy. Amy's life was a bold fusion of art and science. She had once eaten fire in a circus, posed for glamour shoots, and later counseled couples on love, trauma, and healing. But on Valentine's Day 2020, this vibrant woman was brutally murdered in her own home. So what happened to her? And why would someone want to kill a woman like Amy Harwick? Let's find out, together, in the video ahead. Amy Harwick was born on May 20th, 1981, in the picturesque town of Sellersville, Pennsylvania. Little is known about her biological parents. From a young age, she was adopted by Tom and Penny Harwick. She also had a younger brother named Chris. Her childhood and adolescence were, by all accounts, full and happy. After graduating high school in 1999, Amy fell in love and married a musician in Pennsylvania, but the marriage was short-lived. In 2001, she moved alone to Los Angeles to start over. After her divorce, Amy became consumed by a hunger for knowledge. At the same time, she threw herself wholeheartedly into exploring every career she had ever dreamed of. She earned her undergraduate degree from California State Polytechnic University, Pomona, followed by a master's degree in clinical psychology from Pepperdine University, and ultimately a doctorate from UC Berkeley. During her years of study, Amy's personal life was just as colorful. She posed for Playboy to help pay the steep tuition of private university, and also worked as a part-time dancer and model. After finishing her education, Amy emerged as the full package: beauty, brains, and heart. She became a certified marriage and family therapist in the Hollywood community. Thanks to her deep expertise and perspective far beyond what people typically expected from a Playboy model, she was widely respected and frequently invited to speak on television shows as a thought leader in her field. Amy had a gift for understanding interpersonal relationships and offering professional guidance for intimate struggles. She once said that people often misunderstood what a sex therapist does, assuming it was all about sex. In truth, she believed that anxiety and depression in daily life often led to deeper relational issues between partners. Everything that makes you a more attractive partner starts with building confidence. The more confident you are, the less fear you carry. Amy hoped to share her knowledge from as many angles as possible. She created her own YouTube channel, where she provided thoughtful, professional discussions on topics that mattered to a wide audience. Much of her work focused on addressing the physical and psychological challenges people face in everyday life. She also spoke openly about trauma caused by sexual exploitation and explored subjects like gender identity and bipolar disorder. Alongside her research and clinical work, Amy published the New Sex Bible for Women in 2014, a book that emphasized self-awareness in intimate relationships and encouraged women to embrace their desires with confidence and clarity. Amy once told fans that in high school, she experimented with everything from listening to rock and heavy metal to wearing ripped fishnet tights with combat boots, wild leopard print skirts, and oversized men's t-shirts. She said she eventually mastered the art of reinventing herself through constant learning and fearless trial and error. In interviews, Amy shared that, before becoming a licensed marriage and family therapist, she'd dabbled in all kinds of exciting jobs. She modeled for Playboy to pay her tuition, worked as a personal trainer, and even released a rock-themed workout DVD. One of her most vivid memories was performing fire eating in a circus. I think I was finishing grad school at the time, so I was still working. I performed before I ever became a dancer. I ate fire, worked at circuses, and I was even a clown. Probably twice. I did all those random LA jobs. It's pretty common here. She even bartended at one point, joking that she was probably the most sober bartender in town because she was always studying and rarely drank. She said the high pay and the chance to meet people from all walks of life were what drew her to the job. Amy lived a remarkably full life. She was gifted, driven, and had the ability to succeed in almost anything she tried, yet she remained grounded, sincere, and refreshingly real. She kept close ties with her adoptive family and was deeply devoted to her friends. Her charisma was magnetic. She was of course brilliant, but more than that, she was genuinely fun to be around, and that made her a rare gem in Hollywood. Her clients adored her. One shared greater than, Dr. Amy was truly compassionate and loving. Her ability to connect with people felt like a natural gift. No matter who you were, she had a way of joining your therapeutic journey seamlessly. That's what made her so effective. Amy had a wealth of life experience. She was passionate about empowering other women to chase their dreams. She launched a feminist online network in Los Angeles, helping women find jobs, build connections, and uplift one another. She was a vocal advocate for women's rights, constantly spreading hope and positive change wherever she went. Amy was also deeply committed to supporting marginalized communities. She partnered with a prominent figure to assist a sex workers' advocacy organization. Acknowledging the high rates of trauma and self-harm in this community, Amy made it her mission to ensure they had access to professional mental health care. Amy had a wide range of interests. Beyond showcasing her unique beauty in front of the camera, she had a deep passion for photography and discovery. Her photographer friends often said her talent was remarkable, easily on par with professional photographers. Naturally, people often wondered, what kind of man could truly belong in the world of someone like Amy Harwick? That man, for a time, was Drew Carey, the beloved comedian and host of CBS's The Price is Right. The two met at a party in the summer of 2017. Carey was instantly captivated by Amy's vibrant personality, Despite a 23-year age gap, they hit it off. They shared a love for photography, deep conversations, and a mutual passion for learning. Carrie would later recall how stunning and brilliant Amy was, and how he believed her life's mission was to care for and uplift others. Their relationship moved quickly. Within 6 months, they were engaged. Amy even appeared on Drew's show. On Valentine's Day 2018, The Price is Right opened with the couple walking out together on stage. Here's your host, Drew Carey. And now, please welcome my beautiful fiancée, Amy Harwick. He proudly introduced her to millions of viewers as the love of his life. But sadly, their relationship didn't last. They called off the engagement later that same year. Amy later said she was heartbroken by the breakup, but they remained good friends. Life went on. Amy continued her work with joy and dedication. In her free time, she often surrounded herself with a close group of friends. On the night before Valentine's Day 2020, Drew Carey received a message from Amy. At that point, he was dating someone else, but he still cared deeply for her. They had planned to meet up one weekend after the holiday. Carey later told the press he had truly hoped to reconnect with Amy, but that chance was lost forever. Amy spent that Valentine's Day with a few of her close girlfriends. One of them shared that she and Amy had planned a morning hike together. She arrived at Amy's home while Amy was still getting ready. Amy's bedroom was thoughtfully decorated, with a lovely balcony and soft natural light pouring in. It felt peaceful. Her friend remembered Amy picking out a small red button-up sweater and saying, "It's Valentine's Day today." During the hike, Amy acted like a seasoned tour guide, excitedly pointing out landmarks as they wandered through the winding trails of the Hollywood Hills. They chatted about local history, art, and community life before stopping for breakfast at a cafe in Beechwood. Amy shared how much that place meant to her, saying she had found true happiness there. It was clear she was proud of everything she'd accomplished and looked forward to what was ahead. Later that evening, another close friend named Cleopatra hosted a chic Valentine's party in Hollywood. She added a playful twist to the celebration. Every guest had to get up and perform a silly act or party trick on stage. Cleopatra recalled how excited and lively the crowd was that night, with most guests arriving around 7:30 p.m. Amy and a group of friends arrived right on time at the Universal Theater. Surrounded by laughter and light-hearted performances, no one, whether single or coupled, felt alone that night. Amy wore a soft pink velvet dress, paired with a leather jacket and a white handbag. Her accessories were elegant, thigh-high black boots and a delicate rosary necklace. After the celebration, the group took plenty of photos to capture the joyful evening. Her close friend Cleopatra invited Amy to an after-party at her place, but Amy, who rarely drank alcohol, politely declined. Instead, she joined a few friends at a tea lounge where they chatted late into the night and stayed until 12:18 a.m. Amy lived in a 3-story home. She occupied the second and third floors, while the first floor was rented by a man named Michael Herman. Not long after Michael went to bed, he heard a loud noise, something that sounded like breaking glass or dishes crashing to the floor. He assumed it was Amy coming home. What he didn't realize was that sound would mark the beginning of a tragedy. Around 1 a.m. on February 15th, Amy returned to her house. She sent a message to one of her friends from the party, asking to see some of the pictures they had taken together. That message was sent at 1:02 a.m. She also replied to a text from Robert, her closest friend. Amy then walked upstairs to her third-floor bedroom, likely getting ready for bed, unaware of the danger lurking inside her home. Michael, suddenly jolted awake, heard a blood-curdling scream. It sounded muffled, as if someone was trying to silence it, like a hand had been clamped over someone's mouth. Moments later, he heard the sound of a body hitting the floor above him. At first, Michael began shouting from the stairwell, hoping to scare the intruder away. Then he panicked, rushed outside to get help, only to find himself trapped in the gated yard. Desperate, he climbed over the tall metal fence, injuring himself in the process. He ran to a neighbor's house and banged on the door, but no one answered. In a state of emergency, he tried another neighbor, but still no response. Finally, he saw someone walking down the street with a phone in hand. At 1:14 a.m., he was able to borrow the phone and call 911. He told the dispatcher, "I heard her. I heard her screaming. I heard her being attacked." 11 minutes later, at 1:25 a.m., officers arrived at the scene. They found Michael standing in the street, disheveled and shaken. He told police he had heard screams, like someone was being slammed to the ground in the upstairs unit. He also said he couldn't find his phone and had to use someone else's to call for help. When officers reached the third floor, Amy was nowhere to be found. Her belongings were scattered in disarray. The walls and floor were marked with red stains. The balcony door was wide open, but Amy had vanished. Although no camera captured the moment, by that time Amy had already fallen to the ground in a desperate attempt to survive. Police found her shortly afterward. She had sustained severe injuries from the fall from the third floor. At 2:05 a.m., she was loaded into an ambulance. At that exact moment, Amy's phone received a message from a friend, photos from the Valentine's party earlier that night. The friend had no idea Amy was, at that very second, fighting for her life. Tragically, those images would be the last moments Amy ever received. She passed away at 3:26 a.m., at just 38 years old. Investigators quickly found signs of forced entry at Amy's home. They collected DNA samples from the bedroom door and from under Amy's fingernails, evidence of a violent struggle. The rosary necklace she had worn that night was stained with red and found scattered across the room. Forensic experts believe the attacker may have used the necklace to strangle her. Red marks were found trailing from Amy's TV room through the bedroom and out to the balcony. Police also discovered a syringe nearby. Given that Amy didn't smoke, didn't drink, and never used drugs, the syringe seemed completely out of place, strongly suggesting it had been left by the attacker. So the terrifying question remained, who had broken into Amy's home that night, and why would someone commit such a brutal act? On the morning of February 16th, the Monday after Valentine's Day, just as sunlight broke over Los Angeles, news of Amy Harwick's tragic death began to spread. Detectives immediately launched a full investigation. They started by speaking with those closest to her. When they arrived at the home of Robert, Amy's best friend, he was in complete shock. Just hours earlier, Amy had messaged him to confirm details about an upcoming work trip to the UK. But by then, news outlets were already reporting on her death. The heartbreaking headline reached Drew Carey too. He posted a Christmas photo of him and Amy on Twitter, writing, "I hope you're lucky enough to have someone in your life who loves you the way she loved me." The coroner's report confirmed Amy had been strangled until she lost consciousness. Her body and head also showed signs of blunt force trauma. At the time she was thrown from the balcony, she was still alive. Furthermore, the syringe found at the scene contained a lethal dose of nicotine. As police worked to identify a suspect, several of Amy's friends mentioned one name, Gareth Pursehouse. They said Amy had been terrified of him. So, who is Gareth Pursehouse? To understand that, we need to go back to early 2010 when Gareth met Amy at a dance performance. He was an IT specialist from California and a part-time photographer. He also had dreams of becoming a stand-up comedian, but it was clear those dreams hadn't materialized. Gareth stood at 6 feet 4 inches tall, with a muscular build and conventionally good looks. He had a loud personality, and on the surface seemed charming. Outwardly, they looked like a fun, compatible couple. But Amy's friends quickly sensed that something about him was off. His personal idol? None other than infamous serial killer Ted Bundy. And over time, he began sending off more and more disturbing red flags. Amy and Gareth initially bonded over their shared interest in photography. At first, things seemed promising, but within just a few months, Gareth began to exhibit controlling and abusive behavior. He assaulted Amy multiple times and actively tried to isolate her from her friends. Although he would often apologize afterward, the relationship had clearly become toxic. Everyone who knew Amy understood that she was an expert in handling human relationships. At first, she tried to work on the relationship, but as a licensed therapist, she recognized the clear signs of domestic abuse. Eventually, Amy made the firm decision to end things for good. Even after she cut off all contact, Gareth remained obsessed with her. He continued to pursue her in various ways. A mutual friend later revealed that after Amy had distanced herself, Gareth would still frequently ask, "Do you know where Amy is?" and even demanded new photos of her. The harassment became so severe that Amy nearly had a breakdown. In 2011 and 2012, she filed for 2 restraining orders against Gareth. Her complaints included allegations that Gareth had choked her, slammed her head into the floor, and punched her. It took time and effort, but Amy eventually recovered from the trauma. Gareth, it seemed, had finally disappeared from her life. Amy returned to being her energetic, accomplished self. And for a while, she even forgot about the strange and dangerous man from her past. But Gareth had not forgotten her. Over time, negative and defamatory content about Amy began surfacing online. Harsh comments and targeted attacks popped up on a notorious gossip website. Amy was certain it was Gareth behind it. Her suspicions weren't unfounded. He had previously sent threatening emails to both her and her closest friends. Amy told those around her she felt like someone was always watching her. Robert, her best friend, later told police that Amy had once confided in him. Nearly 4 years after their breakup, someone had broken into her home. That person stole her photo albums and erased data from her computer, actions that resembled the work of a hacker or someone with IT skills. Robert also believed the intruder may have planted something on Amy's computer. She later told him that explicit photos of her had been sent to potential employers, leading to lost job opportunities. Amy strongly suspected that Gareth was behind it all. Unfortunately, at that time, her home had no security cameras, so nothing could be proven. Amy was clearly living in fear. During a later trip, she even asked a colleague to stay at her home and take care of her beloved cat, mainly because she worried someone might break in and harm her pet. Time passed, and on January 16, 2020, Amy and Gareth unexpectedly crossed paths for the first time in nearly 8 years. Her obsessed ex-boyfriend clearly had no intention of letting go. Amy had been invited to speak at a mental health and counseling conference. At the industry reception and awards ceremony, she was fully prepared and excited. But while walking the red carpet, she was shocked to see Gareth attending the event as a photographer. At that point, the restraining orders she had once obtained had long since expired. Although Amy tried her best to remain calm, Gareth began yelling at the event. In front of more than 100 guests, he screamed, "You ruined me." One of Amy's friends recalled that she immediately switched into professional therapist mode, doing everything she could to de-escalate the situation. Remarkably, it seemed to work. Witnesses later saw the two of them sitting on a bench near the restroom, talking for at least 45 minutes. Amy's approach appeared to have diffused the tension. At the very least, there were no further outbursts. She believed she had managed to reason with him. Later that evening, Amy and Gareth sat down together at a small restaurant. Gareth asked if he could spend the night at her place, but Amy declined, saying she had a new roommate. After their meal, they parted ways. Following that incident, Amy became noticeably more cautious. She had an extra lock installed on her bedroom door and began carrying pepper spray in her purse. Her best friend, Robert, even suggested they share their phone locations with each other for safety, and Amy agreed. But neither Amy nor Robert realized just how serious the situation had become. There was another chilling detail. 2 weeks after the unexpected reunion with Gareth, Amy made a strangely specific request to her parents. She told them that if anything ever happened to her, she wanted an open casket funeral and a carefully designed headstone. She even listed out her final wishes in great detail. It left her family and friends wondering, had she sensed that her life was in danger? No one knows for sure. On the day of the attack, surveillance footage from a nearby camera captured footage from late that night. In one clip, Amy's roommate is seen knocking on neighbors' doors, desperately seeking help, but getting no response. Detectives formed a theory. Gareth had broken into Amy's home on Valentine's night. The crashing sound heard by Michael, the downstairs roommate, was likely the moment Gareth entered. He then waited quietly for hours until Amy returned home. As soon as she walked in, Gareth ambushed her. Towering over her, he allegedly covered her mouth to muffle her screams, strangled her, and then threw her from the third-floor balcony. Around 4:45 p.m. on February 15th, the same day as the attack, police arrested Gareth, who was 41 at the time, at his home. A sharp-eyed detective noticed that Gareth had multiple bruises on his body, likely from struggling with Amy. Investigators also found a syringe in Gareth's home, identical to the one discovered at the crime scene. The brand matched perfectly, and even the chemical composition of the nicotine inside was the same. Initially, Gareth was granted release on a $2 million bail. However, authorities feared he might attempt to flee, so less than 24 hours after being released, he was rearrested. He was formally charged with burglary and murder. But while in custody, Gareth pleaded not guilty to all charges. Soon after, details about his family history came to light. Abuse toward romantic partners seemed to be a pattern in the Purse House family. Gareth's father, Paul, who passed away in 2019, had also been the subject of a restraining order filed by a former fiancée. That woman had reported being harassed by him through phone calls, emails, and even mutual friends, eerily similar to Gareth's behavior toward Amy. Although the facts of Amy's case were relatively straightforward, the trial was delayed multiple times due to the COVID-19 pandemic. On August 29, 2023, the trial finally began at the Los Angeles Superior Court. Gareth's appearance had clearly changed. With limited resources and freedom in jail, he had gained noticeable weight, which only made his transformation more visible to the public. Prosecutors stated clearly they believed Gareth murdered Amy by pushing her off the balcony. The motive, they argued, was obsession. Gareth had been fixated on Amy for years, and when she rejected his advances, that obsession turned into rage. The prosecution presented DNA evidence found under Amy's fingernails and on the handle of her living room door. Both matched Gareth. Multiple friends also testified about Amy's ongoing fear of Gareth and his erratic behavior at the awards ceremony weeks earlier. The defense, however, told a different story. They claimed Gareth had no intention of harming Amy that night. According to them, he had been emotionally shaken after seeing her again at the awards event and had gone to her home simply to talk. They portrayed Gareth as a heartbroken man in the midst of an emotional crisis. His attorneys also pointed to the syringe found at the scene, suggesting Gareth may have been mentally unstable. They even implied that Amy may have attacked him first, and that he had only tried to restrain her. Another argument presented by the defense was that Amy might have attempted to climb over the balcony herself in an effort to escape. But prosecutors quickly dismantled that theory. They pointed out that if Amy had attempted to climb over the railing, her body would have shown signs, scratches, bruises, or abrasions consistent with that kind of movement. Yet according to the coroner's report, there were no such marks. Her injuries didn't support the defense's version of events. After nearly 8 hours of deliberation, the California jury found Gareth Pursehouse guilty on all counts and recommended the death penalty. However, on December 6, 2023, the court formally sentenced Gareth to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the state of California, this is effectively the harshest punishment currently enforceable. Amy was a highly educated, professionally trained expert. She had the knowledge, tools, and insight to recognize danger. And yet, even she couldn't escape this tragic fate. Her case has sparked serious concerns about women's safety. Law enforcement data in the U.S. shows a disturbing reality. Among people murdered by intimate partners, 34% were living alone at the time, and the majority of victims are women. In the wake of Amy's death, her friends launched a petition to support a new piece of legislation, Amy's Law. The proposed bill seeks to strengthen the enforcement of restraining orders. One of its main goals is to eliminate expiration dates, allowing protective orders to remain active until victims truly feel safe. This is a heartbreaking story. What should have been a sweet, joyful Valentine's night became an unshakable nightmare for Amy's friends and family. And it forces us to ask, what exactly happened between these two people? Do you believe that Gareth's obsession was driven by Amy's beauty, intelligence, and spirit? Looking back, it's clear Amy may have underestimated the threat. Story 5. On the afternoon of July 8, 1993, a horrifying crime was discovered in the upscale residential area of Tamanduta, Kuala Lumpur. Amid the oppressive heat of the southwest monsoon season, a worker was diligently pushing his lawnmower through thick bushes. The roar of the engine echoed in the sweltering heat, what seemed like an ordinary workday. But suddenly, a jarring sound shattered the peace. The mower's blade abruptly jammed, as if it had hit something solid. The worker bent down and pulled back the thick grass to investigate, and then a horrifying sight appeared before his eyes. Among the green grass lay a woman's arm, pale skin, fingernails still painted a light red. The image left him frozen, a chill running down his spine, and he nearly staggered as he ran toward the nearby road in a state of panic to call the police. Police arrived at the scene immediately after receiving the report. In moments, the Tamanduta residential area suddenly became the focal point of a large-scale investigation. During the sweltering afternoon, police patiently turned over every bush, examined every corner and drain, careful with every inch of ground. Within less than 2 hours, gruesome discoveries began to emerge. From deep within the bushes, at the bottom of drains, and even in piles of damp garbage nearby, black plastic bags were pulled out, one after another. Each time a bag was opened, the crowd held its breath, leaving only the choked sound of horror. Inside, dismembered human body parts were clearly visible. This was no ordinary crime scene. It was a meticulously arranged savagery. These body parts had been washed clean in an eerily thorough manner, with no traces of blood, the cuts sharp, neat, and uniform, as if created by a cold and skillfully practiced hand. Right then, everyone understood. This was not an impulsive murder committed in a fit of rage, but a cruel act that had been carefully planned, step by step, detail by detail, chillingly methodical. However, despite finding numerous plastic bags containing dismembered remains, police still couldn't piece together a complete picture of the truth. Because among all those pieces of tissue, the most crucial part was missing, the head. Without a face, they couldn't establish identity. The death of this woman remained, for the time being, a nameless mystery. The forensic pathologist conducted a meticulous examination. Based on the remaining skin and body tissue, he concluded the victim was a young woman, approximately 20 years old. Then, small details gradually emerged. Neatly trimmed nails painted in bright colors, and even the pubic area had been cleanly trimmed. These traces indicated this young woman was someone who paid great attention to her appearance and loved beauty. But who was she? Why did she have to suffer such a tragic fate? 3 days later, on July 11th, police decided to expand the search area around where the body was discovered. Under the scorching sun, search teams began their meticulous and arduous work again, advancing step by step through wild grass and rocks, leaving no corner unchecked. When they ventured deeper into the bushy area, 2 black plastic bags were discovered, carefully hidden in thick grass and damp soil. The moment the bags were opened, the atmosphere seemed to freeze. No one could speak. Only suffocating silence remained. Inside was the woman's head, the only crucial part that had been missing all this time. But unfortunately, after many days exposed to intense sun and weather conditions, it had severely decomposed, swollen, and deformed beyond facial recognition. Police were still at a dead end, because even though they had found nearly the entire body, they still couldn't determine who she was. By this point, police had collected a total of 7 plastic bags, containing a body divided into 11 parts. They tried to piece it together, reconstructing the body's shape, hoping to find some clue about the identity or cause of death. However, even as the pieces gradually fit together, the complete picture of the case remained shrouded in mysterious fog. On the contrary, the deeper they investigated, the more sinister and inexplicable the case became. Traces on the body showed the perpetrator acted with extreme calm and skill, yet left no clear leads. It's important to remember that in the early 1990s, Malaysia didn't yet have advanced DNA testing technology like today, and domestic forensic equipment was very limited. All identification methods at that time relied on manual observation and experienced judgment. No traces, no witnesses, no verified identity. The investigation quickly reached a dead end. To establish the victim's identity, in this desperate situation, police decided to do something unprecedented: publicly release images and identifying characteristics of the deceased in a press conference, hoping to mobilize community strength. Soon after, shocking photos of the victim's skull occupied the front pages of major newspapers. The gruesome images shocked many people. Some readers felt nauseous on the spot. Some even had nightmares for many nights. However, this bold and controversial decision ultimately brought an important breakthrough. Besides releasing images, police also included a list of unique identifying features such as filled teeth and carefully manicured nails. They went further by enlisting the help of Amarudin, a street artist who regularly painted in the Central Arts area. Based on skull photos from the forensic pathologist, Amarudin personally went to the morgue to observe the victim's facial structure, and from there drew portraits of the victim when she was alive. These sketches were published in newspapers and quickly created a wave of circulation in the community. A few days after the sketches were widely published, a ray of hope finally appeared. A shop owner living in the Bandar Baru Bangi area proactively contacted police. He said that a woman renting a room at his place had been missing for many days without any news. And notably, the portrait sketch published in the newspaper bore suspicious similarities to her face. Upon receiving this important information, police forces immediately moved to the address provided by the informant. There, they found the family of the young woman suspected to be the victim of this case. On July 20th, under police escort, a woman who introduced herself as the victim's second older sister, Mrs. Korsindi, went to the morgue at Kuala Lumpur General Hospital to perform the most painful task, identifying the body. Stepping into that cold space, she was overwhelmed by the heavy smell of disinfectant permeating everywhere. The body lay motionless under a white cloth. Korsindi thought she had mentally prepared herself enough for this moment, had tried to reassure herself throughout the journey there. But when the white cloth was slowly lifted, revealing what remained underneath, all mental preparation became meaningless. She immediately lost all strength. Her legs couldn't stand steady. Her whole body collapsed onto the freezing floor. Uncontrollable waves of nausea surged in her throat, sobbing mixed with ultimate pain. The deceased's face had long since decomposed heavily. Facial features faded and deformed beyond recognition. Corsindi tried to search for any familiar signs, but everything seemed to have been erased by time and death, until her eyes inadvertently swept down to the lower body and saw the pubic hair that had been neatly trimmed in a very distinctive way. That moment made her collapse. This was a detail that only extremely close people could know. She quickly covered her mouth, tears flowing uncontrollably, heart-wrenching sobs echoing in the cold room. Because she knew too well there could be no mistake. This was her sister who had been missing for days. However, to ensure the identification was completely accurate with no errors, police immediately proceeded to take a blood sample from Corsindi. This blood sample was then carefully packaged and sent to Singapore, where there was more modern equipment to perform comparative DNA testing. A few days later, amid the family's anxious waiting, the final results were sent back. They had a direct blood relationship. The DNA match rate was undeniable. The identity of the body was finally confirmed. The woman who had been brutally murdered and dismembered was Chua Chortho. On the afternoon of July 21st, police convened a press conference to make an official announcement to society. The identity of the deceased in this sensational dismemberment case had been traced. It was the famous singing and dancing star at the tea house in Bandar Baru Bangui, Kuala Lumpur at that time, Chua Chortho, nicknamed Ijian Hong. Chua Chortho was only 30 years old that year. But in the vibrant nightlife wave of Kuala Lumpur, she was no longer just an ordinary dancer. She was a star, a phenomenon, a name spoken with admiration and curiosity. At the Nine Dragon Karaoke and nightclub located in the Bandar Baru Bangui area, every evening when there was an announcement that Chua Chortho would perform, the